what's up, guys? Welcome back on Sport Vitamins, episode 23. Nowadays, agents play an important role in professional sports. And if you're a coach or an athlete willing to become a pro, choosing the right agent is a decision that sooner or later you will have to make. Today's guest is Kevin Tarca. Kevin is the founder of Creation Talent Agency and the host of a Sports Business Secret podcast. With him, we're going to talk about how the recruitment process works and how to choose the right agent. So, without further ado, here's the episode with Kevin Tarca.
What's up, Kevin? Welcome on the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Roberto.
Where are you right now?
I'm back in New Jersey. I wish I could tell you that I was some exotic place around the world or in Europe, but until this COVID craziness passes, hopefully soon, I'm back in New Jersey in the cold Northeast.
How do you cope with the lack of traveling that agents and professional coaches and athletes are experiencing right now?
I think, from a personal level, yeah, it definitely sucks. I think I don't like to be in one place at one time. I like to meet new people and experience new cultures. So I think it's definitely tough from that angle. It's also tough from the business angle because, part of what I do is building the relationships and showing up and going to games and being places, right? But I think for me, it's all perspective really, because at the end of the day, life could be much worse. I think, if somebody says, hey, you have to sit in your house, when you have a roof over your head and you still have food to eat and things like this, it's easier when you put it into perspective. But obviously it makes you change kind of the way you do business.
Absolutely. And also how you do networking, right?
Definitely. Even like I say, a phone call or a Zoom call is great, or an email, but there's nothing like being in person. Like there's nothing like being face to face and building that relationship. Genuinely, just having a coffee with someone, it's very different. So it's definitely something that has been, let's say, different for me for sure, but I know for everyone as well.
Right. We will go back to this later on during the conversation. I want to start with you with a little background.
Cool. Yeah. So I'll try and sum it up here from my college days. So I grew up in New Jersey, where I am now, and played Division I basketball at Quinnipiac University. So I walked on to the team there and studied finance and economics, which usually makes me sound a lot smarter than I am. But I knew after I graduated, I wanted to be involved with the game, and I knew I wasn't going to play, professionally. So I had thought about being an agent, thought it sounded cool, didn't really know anything about it. And so the first job out of school, I worked with a sports marketing firm, which was obviously a little bit different than talent management. It was more event management. So we produced and managed college basketball events, and I was responsible for some sponsorship sales. Some of our events were at Madison Square Garden and the Barclays Center on ESPN. So that was pretty cool, just to learn that. And then also the relationships with coaches and ADs, right? Athletic directors. So I was basically split the country in half with college teams, and it was my job to get them into some of our events. So that was kind of the start. And then one day I woke up and that dream of the agent things, kept hitting me. And so, I packed the car and drove out to Los Angeles and tried to figure out a sports agency to work with. And so I did that for about a year. I got my feet wet with a small startup agency out there, and worked for free and did the whole grind it out thing, and watched games and took stats and did some recruiting and broke down film, and then in 2016 I had a chance to come to Europe or go to Europe to do the EuroLeague Masters program, which was definitely an eye opener for me, and that was really it was a cool start to a new chapter for me. It was the overseas kind of expansion of representation. And at that point, I was not an agent. So built relationships, came back to the States in 2017, didn't get an opportunity with another agency. And so I just decided to jump off the cliff and figure it out on the way down. And that's when KTA started. And 2018, I got my FIBA license. 2019, I got my MBPA license. And here we are entering the fourth year of, the fourth recruiting class. So that's a little background and bring you up to speed for me.
Oh, that's great. And What are the main differences between, if there are any, of course, between being an agent in the US and being an agent in Europe?
Yeah, there's definitely a few. I mean, first of all, obviously the license, right? So if you're talking about being an agent and representing NBA players, you have to have your NBA license, which is a different process. You have to take the exam and you have to um, study the collective bargaining agreement and go that path. And then if you're in Europe, you have to be a FIBA certified agent, which means you have to take that exam that FIBA administers. And then on top of that, I mean, I think it's just the network as well, right? So, if you want to represent an NBA player and you need to talk to NBA teams or scouts or GMs, you have to have that network, here in the States. Same thing for overseas. So if a guy is not going to make the NBA and they're going to go play overseas somewhere, you have to have that network. You have to have those relationships. So those are the main differences. But I usually call overseas the Wild Wild West. And if there's anybody listening that's involved with the game, they'll understand and probably laugh and know why. But it's very different regulation wise. I mean, here in the States with the NBA and the G League, I don't want to say that everything overseas is not professional, but here in the States, I mean, it's professional. It's very professional. Things are, you know what's going to happen, and everybody follow. Well, I shouldn't say everybody follows the rules, but most people follow the rules. And then overseas is kind of the wild, wild west because you never know who's the decision maker. You never know who's making the deal. You never know when turnover happens quickly. You never know when a sponsor is going to drop out mid-season, so you don't know who to talk to and if you should send a player there. So there's a lot more uncertainty overseas than there is here in the States.
And for example, in this wild, wild west, how do you build your network?
So it's a question I get asked a lot, and typically I'll tell people that I like to go direct. I mean, I typically work directly with teams. I have done deals with other agents that I trust, which is great, and I've met a lot of really cool people along the way. But what I've found is the reason that I go directly to teams is because I've spent that time, that money, that investment in myself to actually visit 35 plus countries and meet people in person and build those relationships. So how to build those relationships? I mean, everybody has their different ways, but for me, I just like to show up. Some places I knock on doors physically, and then I always try to get 1 degree of separation away. So, as I think when we first met, we have several friends or colleagues in common, and that made it much stronger and easier for us to connect. And so that's what I like to do to build my network overseas. But I think, as always, it's a consistency thing. I didn't just show up yesterday and say, hey, let me go talk to the GM of a EuroLeague team. No, like I showed up in countries that people don't think are sexy or third or second divisions. And over time, I was able to build that network up and really develop a reputation, which is why I've been able to represent players from, let's say, in quotes, the low entry levels all the way up to Champions League, and have people from the EuroLeague on my podcast and build the network pretty widely, right? So for me, I think it's just a one day at a time thing, and there's no formula to it, but the network that you build has to be genuine and it has to be sincere, and that doesn't happen in one conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, you have to show up. You have to show up consistently. That's the secret. If you
Yep.
want to say,
Yep.
But it's not really a secret.
That's what yeah, same thing in your world. If one of your players comes to you and says, "Hey, I want to get stronger," okay, cool, and they go to the weight room for 1 week and they lift weights as heavy as they can, right? Okay, that's 1 week. Well, you have to do that over a long period of time and be consistent in order for you to really change that, change your body or change that skill set.
Yeah, it's better to do it for 10 minutes every single day instead of doing it for 6 hours one day and then rest for 2 weeks, of course.
100%, my friend. Absolutely.
And walk me through your recruiting process, if you can call it recruitment.
Sure.
I don't know how agents call it.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on where you go. If you're in the Wild Wild West, some agents consider recruiting very differently than some American agents here. But for me, it's a continuous process that I'm trying to trying to learn. I think very established agents or agencies that have been around for 10, 20, 30 years, they kind of have, although they've adapted their recruiting strategy over the years, they kind of found what works for them. And there's no right or wrong answer. So for me, being here in the States for at least last year, but as my home base, a lot of my recruiting comes from college, and it comes from seniors in college that I think are, and this is again personally for me, that I think are a bit under the radar, because can I go? Am I confident I can represent an NBA first round draft pick? Of course, but is that realistic right now for me to beat out the big agencies to them? No, it's not. So I try to find guys that are maybe late second round, undrafted guys, or guys that are under the radar from mid majors or low majors that I think can have a trajectory overseas that they can make a lot of money playing the game they love. So for me, it's a lot of recruiting here in the States with college. And over the past couple of years, the mindset for long-term is really to be on that international bridge as well. So as well as developing the relationships with GMs and scouts and decision makers overseas, I've also been trying to plant the seeds and dive into the recruiting of young European players that will eventually make their way to the States. So it's a little bit of both. And there's it's always changing, right? Obviously, as the years go on, I hope my recruiting is only the top 10 NBA draft picks, right? I hope that changes a bit, but for now, it's a lot of guys that I see, that I envision maybe getting the chance at playing in the NBA, but really taking their skills on the court and also their character and personality off the court to be able to play overseas and having a long career overseas.
So when you recruit a player, especially if you recruit a young player, as you just said, what's the thought process behind building, for example, a 5-year plan for that player or a 10-year plan?
So it's really tough to do, and I've learned this the hard way, because although you want to have a 5-year and a 10-year plan for someone, and I always try to with some of my guys, see the long term on where they could eventually get, and back out the steps that they need to get there and make them aware of that. But with FIBA and actually contractual representations, you're only allowed to have 2 years on that contract, which makes it difficult. I think it's and it goes both ways. Sometimes I think agents should get longer years, but other times I think players need to have the right to be able to make those changes. But in terms of that strategy of long-term plan, I think it's important players understand and hear what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, because a lot of guys will think they can go from college to Barcelona or college to Jerusalem. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. If you're not acquainted with the style of play overseas in general, let alone in every single different market and different country, there's a different style of play, and educating players on that, about how, hey, 8 points and 7 rebounds in the second division of Spain is very different than 8 points and 7 rebounds in the first division of Portugal. And that's very different than 8 points and 7 rebounds in the EuroLeague. It translates differently. So trying to educate those players on that process and let them know that this will be a process. And if the guys I like to work with is, if they're patient enough and loyal enough and understand enough that I'm going to try to open doors for them, if they perform on the floor, then they'll be able to open doors for themselves as well.
And do you represent also coaches?
I don't. It's something I would like to officially do soon. I think for me personally, it's a matter of as I scale and grow the agency, I don't want to spread myself too thin. I think it's kind of a natural byproduct that, some of the coaches in my network have reached out, and I get asked a lot, both from college coaches here in the States or coaches that want to go overseas, and also pro coaches overseas. It's also a kind of a different, not necessarily a different network, but a different strategy, because a lot of times that process is handled internally. And remember, there's maybe 10 to 15 spots for players, and there's only 1 spot for coaches. So I just found it's not as it's a much more complicated difficult process for an agent, especially one that is not 24/7 living overseas, to represent coaches. So I've tried in the past. I've connected coaches to presidents of clubs, but I don't do it right now. I think it could be beneficial in the future for many reasons, but one step at a time.
For sure. And how would you build a 5-year plan for a coach, for example?
Ooh, for a coach, well, a lot of that, similar to players, I think you have to look at your lifestyle. For younger players and younger coaches, if you, for example, are single and don't have a family or a wife, it's a very different plan than if you do have a family, because the reality is, in order to get started, just like being an agent, just like being a coach, just like being a strength coach or a player, there's levels to it, and you might have to grind and claw your way up. And that might mean going to, as a coach, also a country that you've never even heard of, where they barely pay you any money and it's not very professional, and you're living in a place that doesn't have hot water or Wi-Fi. And so the same thing I tell players, I tell coaches too, like, if you're willing to do that, then that can be year 1, 2, or 3, and you can develop that that reputation and that resume, right? And so if it's a more established coach, I think it's a little bit easier, but in terms of the doors that can be opened because of their resumes, a coach that's coming from an assistant coach that's coming from Jerusalem, like a Ryan Pannone, for example, right? That has built an amazing resume over the years, right? But he also, people forget, at the beginning of his career, he also had to go through that time, right? But doors were open for him after he was at that level, and so I just, it's difficult for me to advise on, if you don't have, it's difficult for me to advise on unless I'm working directly with them. So again, if you're young, be ready to sacrifice. If you're older, I hope your family understands that they might need to sacrifice as well. That's the biggest piece of advice I can give.
That's a great one. That's a great one. Okay. Can you give me a tip for a young athlete or a young coach on how to choose an agent?
Sure. So I think the most important part, well, first of all, you have to educate yourself, and obviously for maturity reasons, I think most coaches understand that. But some players might be a little bit younger and they don't understand that yet. And they, they'll see something on social media or Instagram or what their friend does, and they'll think that's what they need to do. So you need to educate yourself on the process. You need to understand what agents are looking for. You need to understand where you sit in the market, right? So one big piece of advice is look in the mirror and be humble, and tell yourself, okay, am I that good? If you don't have an agent and agents aren't calling you, there's probably a reason. And that might be hard for you to hear as a player, but there's a reason, right? There's a reason I get hundreds and hundreds of messages from players and I can't necessarily help them, because the reality is that they're probably not good enough. Now, that doesn't mean that you should end your dream. There are ways to find an agent and get yourself to camps, but I think once you get to that point where you are looking for agents, and maybe even agents are calling you, you have to find what fits you. And your vision needs to match with the agent's vision. And not every player understands that, because some players want an agent that has the brand name. Some players say, hey, this agency represents Steph Curry, so I'm going to go with them. Okay, that's great, and if you want that brand name, cool. But you have to understand that that same agency has hundreds and hundreds of players. So where do you land on the totem pole? How much time do you need from your agent? If you don't want to hear from your agent and you don't want to develop a great relationship with them off the court, that's okay too. You just have to understand that, right? If you're somebody that wants maybe some feedback after games, or you want the agent to open up other doors for you off the court with marketing potential or endorsements, which you shouldn't be thinking about unless you're an NBA draft guy, then understand that and look for those types of agents and say, hey, I want an agent that's going to be calling me all the time and spending time on me. Okay, well, you better be good enough to expect agents to do that. And maybe if you want to be the face of an agency, or if you're a certain level, but you don't want the brand name and you want an agent to build his agency around you, then you go with a smaller agent with less clients, maybe 5 clients or 10 clients. So it has to be a fit for everyone involved. I think the 3 things that have to line up are the player's vision, the agent's vision, and also reality. Because sometimes an agent might think you're better or worse than you really are. So you have to take that reality into consideration as well.
How, for example, an agent can help his client leveling up, for example, during the off season?
Well, there's a few ways that comes to mind. I mean, I think at the end of the day, agents can open doors, agents can get you into opportunities, but the reality is also what you do on the court is going to level your game up. So I can't, and coaches say this too. My coach used to tell me this when I was a player at every level is, I can't put the ball in the hole for you, Kevin, right? Like, you have to be able to score the basketball. So if you're expecting to level up in the summer and you scored 2 points a game last year and you shot 12% from the free throw line, then you can't expect a big level up, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is just be good at what you do. So if you're a 3-point shooter, continue to work on your 3-point shooting in the summer. You don't have to do all sorts of crazy drills, stop, drop, and roll, and get hit with a pad every time you're shooting a 3-pointer. No, you just focus on doing the basic stuff, right? Be the best at the basics and be the best at what you do best. Just continue to work on it. It's less of a puzzle of how you can level up and what you need to do that nobody knows. It's more of just consistency. Keep working on your game. Keep working on your mind. Keep working on your body. Obviously, stay in game shape, and understand that a lot of it does come from your mind. So, I've talked to players before that have never been to a yoga class in their life. Does that mean they're never going to be successful? No, but as you can attest to, yoga can help your game on the floor, stretching, eating right. So all these things go into how you can level up, but I think it's also a case by case scenario, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And for example, is that one single summer event or maybe one facility that you like where you usually send your players to?
No, that's a great question. I think this is always the $1 million question. And in a perfect world, sure, I'd love to have all my clients in one place in a huge facility where they can go to the beach on their off days and they have meals waiting for them. But the reality also is the summer is off time for players too, right? So especially when you're talking about overseas guys, they want to see their family, they want to see their friends. So they're all not from the same place. And a lot of guys will go back to their their high schools or their colleges or their trainers from home because they kind of have those guys they trust, which is great. And for me, most of my players do that. They go to their own guys in their own cities at home where they can see their family, they can put in the work, and they can what's comfortable for them as a structure for their summer to get better. They can kind of develop that plan and we can go over it together. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do that. But it's interesting you ask because I think there are opportunities. I think some agencies or some events that they say, hey, come to Miami for 2 months and stay in a penthouse suite. And, that's cool. That's great. I mean, I think it's worked for some guys. I don't think you need that. I think you just need to have access to a court and put in the work, put in the work on the court, put in the work off the court. That's just the name of the game, right? You don't have to have all these cool, fancy things in order for you to get better. I mean, it's nice if you do, and a lot of guys deserve that and earn that. But if you don't put in the work for yourself, then you're only cheating yourself.
You're right. You just have to put in the work. That's it.
100%.
All right. Before wrapping up this episode, I want to spend some time talking about your podcast. I'm a huge fan of your podcast, so tell us something about it.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And for those listening, make sure you go tune into the episode that Roberto was on because that was fantastic. No, it's been a fun project. I started it in October, and a friend of mine actually started one as well. And you know, I heard it from him at first, but I also heard it from Russell Brunson. And he put out a piece of content one day and he said, look, you have to basically perfect your craft. And if you can put out content, whether it's a blog post, a podcast, a video, whatever, every single day for an entire year, then you'll never have to worry about money again. I said, well, that sounds pretty cool. And at the time, you know, as we talked about before, not traveling, you have a little bit more time on your hands. So I said, you know what? I think it's a great opportunity to continue to be very transparent about what agents do, be transparent about how I'm growing my agency and the challenges I'm going through. And then I thought it was very cool to bring on guests, kind of like we're doing here, to explain more and teach and educate young players and coaches and agents and whoever wants to listen about the industry in general. And so it's been a lot of fun, and it's kind of blown up quickly, and it's been a good way for me to keep myself accountable. And actually this morning we passed 10,000 downloads, which is awesome. You know, it's been 114 days in a row. We've had some amazing guests on, and you know, people have listened in 67 different countries, which is kind of mind blowing, but it's been fun. You know, I think the same reasons that you started yours is similar to the reason that I started mine. You know, it's great to give back, to educate, to have conversations, and kind of put it out there to whoever wants to listen. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, keep up the good work with your show.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. All right, Kevin. As always, I'd like to finish off with 3 rapid fire questions.
Nice.
So the first one, best city in the world for you.
Ooh. I'm just it's gonna be arbitrary to the day of the week because I have lots of them. I'm gonna say Belgrade, Serbia, because I've been missing it lately. It's one of my favorite cities in the world, and I've spent a lot of time there and had a lot of fun there. And the basketball is obviously fantastic as well.
Of course, basketball is huge over there. Second one, favorite moment as a basketball player.
As a basketball player, I don't know about favorite moment, but definitely a moment in time that stands out was when I was a sophomore at Quinnipiac University. We hosted the Northeast Conference championship game against Robert Morris, and it was the game that whoever won that game went to the NCAA tournament. And so that year we were undefeated at home. It was a sold out. We had a beautiful 5,000 seat arena. And there was probably 7,000 people in there, standing room only, everybody wearing gold shirts. It was amazing, unbelievable atmosphere. And we ended up losing at a last second shot. And so it was an amazing feeling as a basketball player to get to that level and, you know, kind of be so close. And then it's also great because I think that moment is what drives me. And like, even to this day, I still wake up thinking about that game. And you know how close we were to go into the tournament. So I think that moment is just ingrained in my mind forever as a very cool moment, but also as kind of a low point.
Okay, last one. One athlete you would like to represent. It doesn't have to be necessarily a basketball player.
Let's go outside basketball. I would love to represent a golfer. I mean, Tiger Woods is an easy answer, but we'll go with him for now. But any golfer, really. I mean, I think to represent a golfer would be very cool because it's not, you know, it's obviously not a team sport. So, you know, it's just about them and the amount of opportunities that it can lead to around the world, in addition to off the how do you even say that? Off the greens, I guess. I was gonna say off the court, but off the greens would be really cool. So I think I would love to represent Tiger Woods. Tiger's my answer.
Right, great answer. Kevin, thanks for taking the time. It's been a pleasure, and you share so many great insight, and I'm pretty sure that our listeners will take advantage of the tips that you share with them today.
Definitely, man. I appreciate you having me on. This was a lot of fun.